Femininity,
So true.
femininity is almost an excuse for women to avoid accountability. Women control access to sex. Sex is the ultimate power. And women know this, and women abuse this. Because right now it's men competing for the women. All the dating advice online is all about what men need to do to get women. There are feminists exploiting those lonely men to try to sell them OnlyFans, and there are tradcons exploiting those lonely men to try to sell them marriage, which is an unfair deal. And there are dating coaches trying to exploit those lonely men to sell them courses and self-improvement. We all talk about the female entitlement problem. Women are entitled. Well, how do you address women's sense of entitlement without first addressing men's sense of obligation? People will say that, well, it's all natural and, masculinity is a natural process. Well, then why are men shamed to be sculpted that way? Do we have to shame birds on how to fly? Female empowerment, all about liberation and choice, while men's empowerment is all about masculinity, duty, and sacrifice, which is actually the opposite of liberation and choice. How can what empowers one gender be the opposite of what empowers the other? So for women, it's more freedom, and for men, it's more duty and responsibility. And so what's going on here, During the Vietnam War, you had women actually marching for, men being sent off to die in war.
Oh, I see. And now today it's like, you're not a real man if you don't fight in war. Okay,
Not
I see
only
what you're saying.
Not only that, but I mean, look at the male deletion rate, right? And it's like, okay, so why aren't women marching for those lives today?
What up, guys? Welcome to the Just Pearly Things YouTube channel, and welcome to the Sit Down. Today I have John on the channel with me, the man, the myth, the legend behind the best questions on YouTube. Welcome to the show. He is the guy behind the It's Complicated channel.
Hello, Pearl. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So I'm so curious, how do you come up with the questions?
Well, I guess you start to, after a while, you start to notice that women will say one thing and then what they do kind of doesn't always line up with that. And so you start to see patterns, and then you start to see double standards in behavior. And so I would just look at what women would say and then what they would do. Mm-hmm. Or, when you look at double standards, you kind of like flip the genders and you say, well, wait a second, would this be okay if a man did it? And that's kind of the inception of how I guess a lot of it starts.
Mm-hmm. And did you notice this from a young age, or how everyone always wonders, what's your origin story? How did you find the red pill?
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of, especially, men realize that once they get into the whole dating scene, they realize that it's not quite in their favor. There's just different struggles that they go through. I'm sure women go through struggles as well, but, men are kind of expected to be the pursuers and the initiators. And then, some of the earliest questions that I thought of was, it's like, well, women would say that they want a nice guy, but then they continually go for these bad boys who would kind of, F them over and stuff. So it's like, do women even know what they want? And, I would start to hear other, people say things like, women are emotional. And then I just started to dive a little bit deeper and say, well, what's really going on here? And I just figured, okay, let me just see, what women say when I try to challenge them on why they kind of believe what they believe.
And so when you started doing the interviews, what were some of the biggest, what were the most common answers that you got where women's actions didn't match what they were doing?
I think it really came down to the fact that, they would, obviously when they would say they want a guy, who's a gentleman and a nice guy, and then you would just kind of see how they would go for these guys who don't really care about them. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, you want this attention from guys, but then it's not quite, it's like you want a certain outcome. I don't know. I just noticed that most of the dating advice that men would get was always about this is what you're supposed to do, but it was never about what are women supposed to do? You know what I mean? So it was just
there's a burden of performance for men, but not for women.
Yeah. And so at some point, you just wonder, like, what are women complaining about? Like, why is the burden always on men? Why are men always expected to change? And then at one point I was almost just trying to figure out, like, is dating harder for men or for women? And, after all of this red pill content, I think we can pretty much all, mutually agree and come to a consensus on the fact that dating is just much, much harder for men based on just the male loneliness epidemic, based on, the fact that 80% of men are viewed as unattractive according to, the majority of women. So it's like, well, why is that? What's going on in our society right now? So,
and have you had women, because I've been attacked a few times, not often. I mean, I'm probably over it was like this fat chick one time, and she just was trying to go for,
the whale attack.
Yeah, the whale attack.
Okay.
But I was just curious, has that ever happened to you where like people get angry and they try to, because I mean, it can be dangerous sometimes doing street interviews, especially you're going out at night, there's drunk people.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen episodes of you, and I was actually concerned for your safety, where I've seen, some people get triggered. I think, I don't know, it was just something about like a girl like stole your sign or something like that, or I forget exactly what clip it was. It was a while back, but see, for me, I don't just question feminists. I will question tradcons.
Yeah.
I'll question dating coaches and stuff, right? And some people, I mean, if you believe in something, that's fine. I just would like to understand why. But some people can't even defend why they believe what they believe. And the minute that their ideology is challenged, sometimes they go kaplooey. They go, they get triggered. I mean, I was at a convention where I had a cowboy who basically said, look, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. You want to know my opinions. And I said, whoa, let's lower the temperature here. I'm just trying to understand. And so I think anybody can get triggered, but I don't think there's any thing in this world that's not subject to question. Mm-hmm. So that's...
Yeah, because you do a really good job. Like, you don't raise your voice, really. You don't, like, you do a very good job of being, like, even keel mm-hmm. when you... And I don't always do that because they mm-hmm. start to... Like, if they say something dumb, I want to tell them.
Right.
But you do such a good job of not directly telling them, but like you just like trap them with another question.
Yeah. I noticed that like, once people start to get emotional, then logic kind of goes out the window. And so I think that as long as you can kind of just keep it where, everybody is calm and you're just trying to understand what's going on, I think that you can, it's almost like, in some cases, if you're trying to talk to like a mob mentality, you know what I mean? It's just people are trying to antagonize people. You're not going to come up with anything productive. But if you kind of have like a one-on-one conversation, you say, well, let's dive into this a little bit deeper. What is actually going on? What is the thought process behind why you believe what you believe? Is it something you've learned from your experience or something you were told? And so you start to, and a lot of times people start to think about this stuff and they say, that's a really good question. I don't know why.
I bet you get that a lot.
Yes.
Like that's gotta be, you could do like a compilation of that's a really good question.
I actually did do that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, early on, but yes.
So, like, did you go to law school or something? Like,
no,
what was your background before? Because you sound almost like a lawyer when you do it. I mean, much more like even keel, obviously, but the way you ask questions.
People have multiple times said in my comment section that I should have been a lawyer. But I think what happens is you start to notice patterns. And when I interview people, after a while, you start to hear, the same things and you can almost predict what they're going to say. If I ask them this question and we agree on this premise, then it's almost like a game of chess. Sometimes, you can make the argument like I'm playing chess, they're playing checkers because I'm a couple moves ahead of them because I know what most people are going to say. They might, I'll ask them one question. It's either going to be this answer or this answer. So then if we go to, this answer, then and it goes down a chain of a logic chain of questions.
So you've recently had a video on the tradcons that I really liked. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but it was like the last month.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's not. I mean, I've done a video literally with the title tradcons.
Oh, that might have been the title.
but I've done several episodes on the tradcons, and one thing just real quick that I just wanted to just
Go ahead.
I think one criticism I have of the manosphere just as a whole is that I think that most people tend to focus on feminism as the only problem.
Mhm.
And that's one thing I really appreciate about your channel is the fact that you are willing to call out and challenge tradcons.
Mhm.
There have been recently in the space some other people who have called out, tradcons as covert feminists.
Mhm.
And so I think that there needs to be a lot more focus on that. But just going back to what you were saying, as far as the episode, was there anything in particular?
Well, I just was curious on your thoughts on the Daily Wire. Like,
Mhm.
they're the tradcon idea that men need to get married, to man up, and
Well, okay.
ahead.
Definitely, when I've seen you call out the tradcons, usually you'll call out like I love the interview that you did with Michael Knowles. We talked about marriage and it not being a good deal for men. And in my last episode about the dowry, I actually used a clip of that
Mhm.
where he basically said that if you get a prenup, it invalidates the sacrament and all that other stuff. But not only do we talk about how the tradcons view marriage and they're not really doing enough as we would all like to see them kind of reform the laws and the
Mhm.
family courts and remove the liabilities when it comes to marriage, but also just how they view masculinity, how being a man is all about protect, provide, sacrifice, serve, don't complain. And so the way that masculinity is being defined, I think, is a big problem. And one of the questions that I want to ask at some point coming up is, do you think men are smart enough to realize that masculinity is the first thing that anyone will attack when they want to control men?
I just did it. That's a really good question.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think the answer is? Do you think men, because when I hear that question, my mind goes two ways. One way is I've seen men take some really, really bad deals in my lifetime.
Mhm.
But I think social media also has opened the floodgates where women used to be a lot more deceptive and they can't be.
Mhm.
I see like on TikTok and stuff, women getting like ratioed when they tell like a abuse story, or do you know what I mean? Like, and that just never used to happen like 10 years ago. So, or men, realizing that they're the bailout guy,
Mhm.
where I don't like 10 years ago, they just kind of fell for it because we didn't have all this media.
Mhm.
That's my initial thought, but I don't have an answer. So I'm curious what you think.
Well, like, okay, if I had to answer my own question, I would say that, so masculinity is almost like this pre-scripted idea, this identity that men have to follow, where I guess you like, okay, man up and get married, or okay, if you don't do A, B, and C, you're not a real man. So masculinity is also the first thing that's promoted when they want to control men. And I think that you see tradcons doing this. You even see some red pillars doing this.
Mhm.
They will say things like, oh, you've got really feminine energy right now, or you're a beta male, or you're a simp, or you're a weak man, or you're gay. First thing, and I think that the strongest men are the ones who don't fall prey to that.
Mhm.
Even following up in that logic train, I was going to say, do you think it's true that our society is more willing to accept gay men than it will accept straight men who don't meet masculinity standards?
Oh my gosh, that's I think you're right. Like they're more willing to accept
Well,
gay men than
So then why do we see gay men as more oppressed than straight men when straight men can't even be themselves
Wow.
without following this masculine script?
Have you done a video with that one
That's
yet?
coming up.
Okay, that was like that is a great line of questioning. Wow.
Thank you.
No, because you're totally right. Like people will shame. I mean, I even use the simp one. I can't help it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think
Yeah,
that
no,
it's all about, that's just, you see it everywhere on social media. Women do it. Tradcons do it. Some red pillars do it.
Yeah.
It's like this is what a real man is supposed to be. And I'm saying, well, why? Another line of questioning that I've used in a past episode was when we talk about what empowers men and what empowers women. Why is female empowerment all about liberation and choice, while men's empowerment is all about masculinity, duty, and sacrifice, which is actually the opposite of liberation and choice? How can what empowers one gender be the opposite of what
Right.
empowers the other? So for women, it's more freedom, and for men, it's more duty and responsibility. And so what's going on here, you know?
So, what is your goal with your content? Do you have like an end goal that you're hoping to achieve, or I'm just kind of curious what, like in 5 years, you're hoping to get?
I think that we need to have more honest conversations about what masculinity truly means, what it means to be a man, what the expectations are of women, what the expectations are of society. I think that what's happening right now is, are we going to accept a world of double standards, or are we going to try to, level the playing field and actually have equality? Now, what's happening is a lot of times people say, well, men and women can't be equal because we're not the same. But I don't think that's necessarily true, because nobody in our society is truly the same, but we should, different races aren't the same, but we should all have equal rights under the law. We have equal justice. So I think that, just to say that men and women, should there be double standards just because we're not the same? I mean, I understand that, we have different strengths and we have different weaknesses, but I think that, to have these very strict roles is a very kind of a strange idea in a society where the laws aren't the same, the technology is different. It's a completely different culture. And, I think that another question I wanted to ask you, actually, I'll throw it back at you. If you had to choose, what would you rather see? Would you rather see women go back to the way they were before feminism, or would you rather see men liberated from their masculine role?
I would rather, I think the only solution to feminism is more feminism. So
Explain.
So I only think like when women start getting the same sentences as men, that they might stop like hitting them, for example, right? When they actually start being put in jail. Or, women with the right to vote, when they start actually having consequences for what we vote for instead of being bailed out. That's more what I would like to see. I'd like to see more fair laws where we're actually equal under the law.
Okay, well, for example, when we talk about false accusations, right? I've heard a lot of people, suggest the idea that there should be an equal punishment for a false accusation as if, you were convicted of that accusation. But obviously, yeah, we need to have more accountability or, equal accountability, I guess, for these things, because, if women don't have skin in the game, there's no incentive.
Correct, yeah.
So I think that it comes down to the fact that I think, I don't know if it's necessarily, it's going to be a combination of asking more of women and maybe slightly less of men.
Well, and also women are having like, I'm one of 10 kids. We're having like 1.5. I don't know if that's enough to be a housewife.
Well,
like one kid, you could go like be a teacher or something.
Well, I mean, is it? I read a comment this morning where someone said, "Is it surprising for women to expect women to want to have children when women are now expected to be in the workforce and providing, even for themselves?"
Well, yeah, but the average is 1.5.
Yeah.
So to me, men still want to have kids even though they have to work.
Right. It's true. Right?
Yeah. So I just don't think women want to be mothers as much as we originally thought. Because if we wanted to, we would have.
So how do you respond then when people say that, women naturally want to be that way? Like, in other words, if it was natural, why did it change?
I don't think it was. And the reason, what made me come to this conclusion? So it was, I couldn't believe how mad women got over abortion. It was like, that was the most visceral when I would debate women, where they would just get so angry. And I'm like, why are you so angry over just a difference in opinion? And I used to fight really hard because my parents adopted kids. And so pro-life was just something I kind of grew up with. But then I just realized that the infant mortality rate is very similar to the abortion rate today.
Wow.
So that leads, I don't have proof or evidence of this, but just anecdotally arguing with women and seeing how much they just fight to what I would view as abort their children, kill their children. I think it's always been like this. I think it's like now that social media is here, we can see what women actually are.
It's
Do you
also,
disagree or agree?
Well, I think that, Yeah, I mean, I can see that, but I also think that as far as women wanting to be able to, it just comes down to the fact that women want to be able to have the choice to do that. I mean, obviously, I think that, I used to always kind of wonder about this. It's like, okay, well, the women who are having abortions, do we really want those women reproducing anyway and stuff? Because they're probably just going to raise more, male feminist children and stuff, I guess. So,
I mean, I just think it's useless to fight over it. Like they'll die. Like I think the pro-life movement, like, yeah, they got Roe versus Wade, but if you think a plan B is an abortion, which they do, I mean, those are like through the roof.
Yeah.
So I just don't see it going anywhere in my lifetime. But it would be interesting to I think men, we've talked about this, but men should be able to opt out of child support if women can opt out of motherhood.
Of course. Yeah.
And that's what I mean. The
financial abortion.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. I think the solution to feminism is more feminism. We asked to be free. Here you go.
Well, one of the things that I was looking into is the idea of back in the 70s, and I mean, I'm sure you've heard of Warren Farrell, for example, right? He was kind of like the father.
Oh yeah, I met him. Yeah,
the father of this men's liberation movement, where basically, in the 70s they were trying to liberate women, but then they were also trying to liberate men. There's actually a famous black and white photo on the internet of a protest where it said, let's share custody, and they wanted mandatory 50-50 physical custody, and they also wanted men to be viewed as more than just success objects. Meanwhile, today, we're promoting the very opposite of that. We're saying that men should be success objects. And so I think that maybe revisiting that idea of maybe gender roles can be more fluid or more of a choice as opposed to more of an expectation.
So what would that look like to you? So relationship beginning to end, how would it go?
Well, I mean, I think that, there are plenty of things that women are capable of that they're not doing just because they believe that that's a man's job.
Okay.
Anything women don't want to do is automatically labeled masculinity, right?
That's such a good point.
I mean, women are perfectly capable of approaching men for business, but they won't approach men for relationships.
No, that's so true.
And it's crazy because if women approach men, they're far more likely to have success than if men approach women. Plus, women don't like being approached by the men that they don't like. So kind of.
So you'd like to see women approach men?
Oh, absolutely. I think that would definitely. But a lot of people will say, oh, but that the man is supposed to lead, and it's like, well, the women control the dating market, but the men are somehow the leaders, and it's kind of a weird.
They kind of did that in Bumble. Now that everything's digital, do you think that works? Or
of course not, because when a woman messaged you on Bumble, what's her message? Hey.
I don't
That's
know.
all they say. They say hey and nothing else, and then they still expect the man to kind of take over. In fact, I even asked a question about this similar. I said, okay, if men are expected to protect women because they're physically stronger, why can't women pay all the bills? Why are both duties assigned to the man? So there are plenty of, because we still have this idea, his money is our money, and her money is her money. And I'm saying, okay, well then what are women working for? You know what I mean? So there's plenty of things that women are capable of, and it's like, okay, well then step up and prove it. But we're always expecting the men to step up to delusional standards. Men have more. We're asking more of men than has ever been asked in history.
And the other thing too is women's money is way easier to get. It is far easier to make money as a woman because at 22, you could go be a pharmacist. There are girls from my school that went and made 6 figures right out of college as a pharmaceutical sales rep. How long would that take a guy to do?
Well, women are getting, they have female-only scholarships.
Yeah.
Women are getting, obviously there was all the DEI stuff. I don't know how that's changing now with the new administration. You also have the, women they always have a bailout. They could do OnlyFans if they want to. Women, female bartenders, female hostesses, cocktail waitresses in Vegas. I mean, they make a lot of money just because they can use their looks to open a lot of doors.
Is that a thing here? I've heard that there's in Vegas, really hot broke guys that they just live off of these bottle girls. Is that a thing?
I don't know. It's possible. I mean, I'm sure that.
But you do interviews all the time. You never run into anything like that.
Not so much, but that would be a good question. Maybe just kind of find out. Do you got some some Chad living with you who I mean, look, I've heard some women saying, oh, I've taken care of men before, but I mean, are women going to take those men seriously for a relationship, or are they just looking for an F-boy? You know what I mean? So
Yeah, there was a guy I knew in London, and that was his play. Is he went and got really jacked, and he would just hit on like 32-year-old lawyers and live for free.
Yeah.
In London.
Well, that's the thing. Also, it's kind of like
he kind of reversed the system where he's like, I'm just gonna go to the gym. It's easier than getting a job.
Yeah. Well.
Go ahead.
Well. It's funny too because it was kind of like I remember when I was at the AVN Awards and I was interviewing the sex workers. I asked a question about if a unwanted pregnancy happened during the shooting of a professional scene, because obviously sex work is filmed without condoms. Then, is there anything that the man can do to avoid being held responsible for child support? And this woman said to me, well, if I get pregnant, then I'm definitely going after that man for child support. And I said, well, actually, since female sex workers are getting paid more than male sex workers, wouldn't you be the one responsible to pay child support?
What'd she say?
Actually, well, it's unfortunate because I didn't think of that at the time. I thought of that after the fact. So That's the thing. Sometimes, follow-up questions will come a little bit late. Like, I said, oh, I should have said this or should have said that. But I did kind of, I don't know. It's just, I think that even when I'm doing like street interviews, sometimes it's like so noisy. I mean, just like this is one of the noisiest cities. I mean, I'm out on the Strip, on, a Friday or Saturday night, and you've got motorcycles and helicopters. And sometimes people are like right in front of your face and I can't hear what they're saying. And so there's times where I want to follow up, or sometimes I think of, a good follow-up that I could say later. And so, it's just, I'm an evolving creator just like you are and stuff. I'm learning new things, as I grow. If you look at my earliest stuff, I'm thinking, oh, I could have said this. And, so we're all learning.
So, okay, so you'd like to see women approach men. Like what other masculine duties would you say? Would you like men to be like
the idea that men are expected to be the sole providers, or that, or just this notion that, that men have to have all this money. I mean, who's advocating for the average man? Do we want to live in a society where only the top 10, 20% of men get all the women, and then the bottom 80% of men are all just celibate? Mm-hmm. And then what's going to be the incentive for them to want to do anything?
Right.
And then we're sitting here and we're saying, oh, well, men are weak because they want to stay home and play video games. And it's like, well, what should they do? Go out and be in the social scene and get, abused and get ripped off? So I think that what's happening is I almost believe that the male loneliness epidemic might be by design, because I think that, the whole idea that sex sells. And I think kind of like everyone's exploiting men now. Everyone's exploiting that problem. I think that there are feminists exploiting those lonely men to try to sell them OnlyFans. And there are tradcons exploiting those lonely men to try to sell them marriage, which is an unfair deal. And there are dating coaches trying to exploit those lonely men to sell them courses and self-improvement. So
I guess how would that... I'm just trying to think of a world, do you think that's even possible where men, women are really going to approach men?
Well,
I'm not saying it wouldn't be nice. I'm just wondering if you think, or that go ahead.
I think what happens is necessity is the mother of invention. People do what they have to do. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think that the reason a lot of men simp is because they kind of have to.
Yeah.
Because men, you ever hear the expression "all men pay"?
Yeah.
It's like even if you're not paying with your money, you pay with your money, energy, attention, and time. Men have to earn it. So it's kind of like men just have to play the game, and women are the ones who make the rules. And so what ends up happening is I think that it just comes down to a question of who has the leverage. Right now, women control access to sex. Sex is the ultimate power. And women know this, and women abuse this. And so men are basically stuck, men have a higher biological need for sex than women. I think men actually, sex is a need for most men. And so I think that in order to kind of level the playing field, I'm not necessarily saying women have to approach men, but in other words, I believe that women are coming from an abundance mindset. Men are coming from a scarcity mindset. Of course, unless you're that top 10% man who has women approaching you. And the whole idea of women approaching is kind of not that far-fetched, because a lot of these dating coaches want to sculpt men to become that super high-value man that women chase.
Mm-hmm.
So women will chase the minority of men, but men are chasing the majority of women. So I think what has to happen is there has to be some kind of shift in leverage. And I think a big thing that would help that is men being given more access to more sexual access. In other words, I think what's happening right now is everyone's telling men, step up and pay a higher price, to the point where they're overpaying. I think what we need to focus on is I think we need to figure out ways to lower the price.
Mm-hmm.
I've done several episodes on, I think, that legalization of prostitution. I know it's a very controversial topic. Not a lot of people talk about it, but I think if prostitution was safe and regulated prostitution, I'm not talking about streetwalkers. I'm talking about if we had brothels and men could go get sex anytime they wanted, I think that women would have to be forced to bring more to the table because sex wouldn't be enough.
Do you see that in Vegas? Because isn't it semi-legal here?
Not necessarily. It's legal in Pahrump, I believe, or in Nye County. I think it's like a 2-hour drive away, but it's not convenient. It's not affordable. Most people can't afford, a $300 to $500, you know what I mean? But what we have right now is almost worse than prostitution, because I think men are paying for the opportunity to maybe get it, but they're not actually getting it. And so I think, I've even asked the question, if men could get sex anytime they want, almost like go to a massage parlor, or almost like we have dispensaries for, I think that if that was available to men, I think they wouldn't feel the need to overpay. They would be more selective because they would, and I think there would be no reason to be with a woman other than love.
And I could actually see that potentially happening. Could you?
Well, I mean,
prostitution getting legalized.
Why not in Vegas? I mean, it makes the most sense here to start with. But I don't know. I mean, it might be an unfortunate reality that we're headed towards, but I know that tradcons definitely wouldn't like that because it promotes degeneracy, according to their.
Yeah, but if they cared about degeneracy, they would promote young marriage, and they don't.
Well,
yeah, like because like sex is a need, and people are going to have sex with somebody. So if you're not promoting people to get married at, like, when does the sex drive start? Like, I don't even want to say it because we're on, like, it's kind of uncomfortable and we're on YouTube, but it's like, it's pretty young. So like if we're having sex, like urges from the time you're 14, 15, 16 years old, like, even at 22, most people aren't going to be virgins if they have the choice.
Yeah.
So I'm like, unless you're promoting a young marriage, what are people going to do about their sex drives? I was just on a Christian show like 5 days ago, and it just premiered today actually, and I was arguing with the guys and saying that sex was a need for men, and that if Christians like cared about degeneracy, they would push young marriage, like 18.
Someone told me also that I think could that possibly even keep marriages together? I mean, someone said something about like I think it was in Japan where married men will go off and go see concubines or whatever it is, kind of on the side, and the wives just don't want to hear about it. But I'm not sure. I mean, it's should men be stuck in a dead bedroom marriage? You know what I mean? Because I mean, obviously, when we talk about marriages, a lot of times men are hostages within their own marriage.
Yeah,
and women are paid to leave, and men. It's cheaper to keep her.
I'm not saying that guys, especially in this climate, should get married at 18. But I'm saying if the conservatives cared about degeneracy, they'd push it, right? Because then that problem's solved.
Yeah. I kind of had this question about that. I said, why is it that anything feminists don't like, they label misogyny, and anything that tradcons don't like, they label degeneracy?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. That's a good question.
So it's just two competing ideologies.
So how would you like to see the dating process go? Like in this is just a dream world, right? Or
well, I would say that, ideally, if you could go and, just approach the woman that you want and she's, receptive and she's, not like, oh, why are you talking to me?
Sorry, I meant like in like the women approach the men and then what? Sorry, in this like continuing that thought process.
Oh, well, just women approach men, and just I think that
Like women pay for dates?
why not?
Yeah. Okay.
Why not? Yeah,
I've said that before.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why not. What is the point of women having money? But I think, in my experience, relationships usually work the best when the woman likes the man more than he likes her, because then she's willing to lower some of her standards and actually have some skin in the game and invest and be willing to take some risks. But right now, I think that women just have, if we're talking about, average men, women have all the choice, all the options, all the leverage. So it's almost like you need to give men more options, and then women have to, because right now it's men competing for the women. All the dating advice online is all about what men need to do to get women. Women are the prize. And then when you look at like same-sex relationships, it's like, do women need to have confidence in game to approach other women? It's so much more balanced, but it's like, when you start to look at same-sex couples and how that dynamic works, it's like when women date women, who's responsible for paying all the bills? But as soon as a man is involved, now he's got to do all the work. Why? Because he's got to follow the masculine script. That's anything women don't want to do is labeled masculinity. So it's a way for femininity. So femininity is almost an excuse for women to avoid accountability.
Okay, can you give me an example?
When you have women say, "I want a strong masculine man to put me in my feminine," it basically just does a man need a soft feminine woman to put her and put him in his masculine? You know what I mean? It's like for women, femininity is conditional. For men, masculine, like it's a woman's prerogative to change her mind, but it's a man's duty to be consistent. So it's just all about, men are held to a standard. We all talk about the female entitlement problem. Women are entitled. Well, how do you address women's sense of entitlement without first addressing men's sense of obligation? People will say that, well, it's all natural and, masculinity is a natural process. Well, then why are men shamed to be sculpted that way? Do we have to shame birds on how to fly? There might be a degree of that's natural, but I think that masculinity is almost being hijacked, and it's kind of being defined as, you've got to check all these boxes. And I think that, it wasn't always this way throughout history. And so, we have to kind of compare how we got to, where we are currently in the dating market.
So what do you think is different today than, what part do you mean it wasn't this way for all of history? Because wouldn't you say for most of history, men were the head of their household, they did provide to some extent? I know there was the dowry that women brought, but it came from her dad, not her.
Right. Okay, let's go back to maybe the 1970s. I wasn't necessarily alive then, but I'm saying if you talk about, back then it was, make love, not war. I think that we were kind of a little bit more headed towards equality back then. I think that, look at it this way. You had, during the Vietnam War, you had women actually marching for, men being sent off to die in war.
Oh, so, I see. And now today it's you're not a real man if you don't fight in war. Okay.
Not only what you're saying. Not only that, but I mean, look at the male deletion rate. Right. And it's okay, so why aren't women marching for those lives today?
Yeah, you didn't they do a million man march a while ago?
You're talking about in the 90s?
I think that I know. That's what I was thinking. It was in the night, no time recently.
Yeah, I think that was more due to police brutality and and racism and stuff like that. I think it had more to do with that than it had to do with just kind of
Oh, really?
As far as I remember, I think it had something to do with the Rodney King.
Oh, I totally thought it was for men. I don't know. I wasn't a lot, or if I was 5. So I don't know.
Well, we're trying to, like I said, do forensic investigations on what happened in the past and how it correlates in a modern context.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing. Women are so good at rewriting history too.
Absolutely.
So you have to sift through so many historical documents to even find I just had This Is Shaw on the channel, and he was talking about the dowry in depth. Yeah. And I couldn't believe why don't conservatives talk about that?
Yeah, I mean exactly. And so just more people should ask, like, what is a dowry? And I just did an episode on this, inspired kind of like by what he was talking about. He actually did a fantastic conversation with Paul Elam about this, bringing this up. And so it's like, okay, when you think about it, some of the most masculine men throughout history, like, Julius Caesar and King Henry VIII, they took dowries. And yet today we're being told that you're not a real man unless you pay 100% of the bills to put the woman in her feminine. So when you talk about rewriting history, this idea that, men just have to, this is the way it's supposed to be, and it couldn't possibly be any other way, even though when you look back in history, it wasn't always that way. So why are we conveniently ignoring those arguments? So I want to see more kind of people being challenged on what they're saying, and not just the feminists, but I want to see, a lot of these influencers and masculinity coaches and pickup artists and stuff like that. I want to see them all get challenged, because at the end of the day, we're all just searching for truth. But I don't like when I ask questions, I'm not necessarily trying to tell people what to think. I just want them to think for themselves, and I'm trying to extract the truth. And sometimes I have a perception of what I think the truth is, but by no means am I saying I have all the answers. I'm just, go ahead and change my mind. Let's try to figure this out. But, these are real issues and these are real problems, and we want to have real solutions and not just sit here and, try to sell people a fantasy that is unattainable.
So how do you think childcare should go? So like you get past you go 50-50 on the relationship. Now you're both working. The kid's under 3. You need someone to watch them. Who does it?
Well, I mean, I know there's with the tender years doctrine, and, people typically go to the idea that women are better.
I don't think that. So,
well, I mean, obviously, if women are having abortions and stuff, I mean, do they really?
I'm just curious, because you were saying you'd like to see some of the masculine duties be challenged, and so I was just curious how you would see the young years of a kid going.
I think, I think that men can be good fathers if, it really just comes down to who has the opportunity to be, who has the opportunity to be present, who wants to be present, and who wants to, have a strong connection with their children. I haven't really thought that much about it, to be honest.
Okay.
I think that it's something that, like someone said to me, okay, who would you trust running a daycare center? Bunch of women or a bunch of men, right? And automatically, most people assume that, I would leave my child with a bunch of women instead of a bunch of men,
Yeah, I'd trust the men more.
Really? Okay.
Look, just because I've looked at child abuse stats, women are more violent towards kids.
Okay. Well, like I said, that's something that obviously, should be looked at more. So
yeah. Okay. I was just curious because it's under 5 who once they're in preschool and up, it's a different story where both parents can work. But I think one parent has to, I'm not saying it should be the man or the woman, but I was just kind of curious.
Well, I've had a lot of women say things like, now that women are expected to be breadwinners along with the men, women almost feel like, oh, well, we have to, be the homemaker, the caretaker, and also make money. And the men are just, the breadwinners. So the men need to step up more and help us more around the house. I think kind of where we're headed is kind of everyone's kind of going to be expected to do everything. But it just depends on what's more convenient. Obviously, if a woman is pregnant, then it makes sense for the man to definitely step up and, help her. But at some point,
my mom ran a marathon 6 months pregnant. I think they over exaggerate.
Well, I mean, to a degree, but I'm saying that obviously, someone wrote a really excellent comment that I learned more things from my comments as well. But someone wrote that an employer is going to basically expect a woman to get back to work after 12 weeks. So at some point, why can't a husband do that? Because women, what's the question I had? It was like, why are women more willing to submit to their employer than they're going to submit to their husband and children? So,
So what do you think? You mentioned that you'd like to see some things change in the space. What are they?
There's too much blame on men, and I think there's too much focus on masculinity and not enough focus on the misandry. And whenever we do talk about misandry, we only talk about the misandry that comes from women. we don't talk about the misandry that comes from other men. We look at shaming women as hate, but when we shame men, it's motivation. Mm-hmm. And I think, why aren't they both hate? Why have we come to assess the average man as unacceptable and he has to change and improve? What's wrong? I mean, I get it. Like, I'm not against the idea of self-improvement. I'm not telling men, like, be a loser and don't ever, achieve anything. But, sometimes,
like, men have a right to enjoy life. Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, I see rants online from guys who are good-looking guys and shouldn't even have a problem, and they're exhausted. They run into burnout because they feel like, it's never going to be enough. Mm-hmm. And so, and the other thing is, it's like there's this idea that just because, men are appreciated, somehow that validates a lot of the sacrifices that men are expected to make. And I think that, we can't just, like, why would women appreciate the sacrifices that men make if they're just going to continue making those sacrifices? Mm-hmm. So I think that either women have to have a duty or neither one of them have to have a duty or something like that. But it's the double standards in our society that persist that, have to change. And what's interesting is it's like, well, why does the manosphere complain about double standards, but then just say, well, men and women are different? Mm-hmm. Well, then, so are you saying double standards are okay? So there's a lot of contradictions I see in the manosphere that I'd like to challenge them on. Mm-hmm. But then if I call out the manosphere for some inconsistencies, then they're going to label me a feminist and say, I'm clearly not a feminist.
Have you done a back and forth with Myron ever? Have you ever like done a debate?
Not really.
I would love to. I think he'd maybe do it. I would love to watch it just as a viewer, because I know he does a lot with his call-in shows where he tells them to like I watched this one. And this is not me throwing shot at him. I like Myron. He's a good guy. But I saw him like do a call-in show where, what was it? He had a couple on the show and they both made money. And he basically told, like, the girl was a little bit ahead in her career because she was like military or something. Okay. And he was telling the guy that he wasn't doing enough. But I was looking at her, I'm like, she's fat.
Yeah.
Like, you can, I was like, I'm like, she's got to get on the tread. You know what I mean? Yeah. Before we're going to say she deserves like, do you know what I mean? I'm like, she's got to be in shape to at least like.
Well, that's the thing. When you're talking about all the expectations placed on men, you gotta be jacked and you gotta be 6 feet tall and six figures, and it's like, well, women can't even do the bare minimum and just be, like,
eat less.
Yeah,
we don't even have to work out. We just have to eat less.
Right. Is it harder to grow muscles or just not overeat?
Yeah.
Or is it harder to lose weight or gain height? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there are things that men are shamed for that we can't even control. Mm-hmm. Women have more control over the things that, that we shame them for. I mean, obviously, when it comes to like men being shamed for being incels and women being shamed for being sluts, women control their body count way more than most men do because women are the control access. Yeah, the gatekeepers and stuff. So, but as far as the other thing also, I think that there's this concept going around the manosphere called hoflation, right? Men today have to work 5 times harder than their grandfathers did, for women 20 times worse than what their grandmothers were. And yet, if we're telling men that women have these delusional expectations, now go out and fulfill those delusional expectations, are we not feeding the very hoflation problem that we're complaining about?
Yeah. I just think there's always going to be guys that are like, that's my only choice. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying they should or they shouldn't. I'm really not here to tell guys how to date. I've never dated women, so I just don't have an opinion on that. But I just, like, I've interviewed guys where they're just like I had a friend in London. I'd never met him. He had never had a girlfriend that like expected him to not cheat. Like, it was always a one-sided open thing. Mm-hmm. And talking him out of like, because he kind of did all the stuff. Like, he got the muscles. He was a really successful. I'm not going to say the industry, but he was very like good in his field. And I'm like, if you would tell him, well, you're feeding women's delusional he would say, I don't care. Like, I have my 5 women. I do not care. Right. And like the way he would, I know him. So what he would say is he'd say something like, well, then why don't I did all this work. Why didn't you do all this work? Right. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I'm just curious how you would respond to something like that.
I mean, typically, when the man does the work, it's the mindset where why does a society that tells a man he doesn't deserve a woman when he's broke have any right to tell that man he only deserves one woman when he's rich? So the man is going to say, well, I've done the work. Now I'm a high status, high value man.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to exercise my options. And so are women willing to, share those men, or are they willing to settle for more average men if they want the loyalty? So it's kind of,
I saw this guy do I was like he would bring like two girls that he was like hooking up with to a party. He just did not care. He's like, leave me.
well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think that modern women today are almost like concert groupies. They just want to be with a rock star, or they want to be, you know what I mean? They want to be that trophy, that arm candy and stuff.
I will say though, I used to think the money mattered more to women than it does. I've seen a lot of women from the show just sleep with like guys in certain positions. Like they really like bartenders. Like, aren't club promoters broke? And they're always
well, I mean, so they'll go for a broke Chad, basically, someone who's just a good,
or just in the right like comedians. They're kind of like, a lot of them aren't like super good looking, but they're funny.
Yeah.
I
was wondering about that also. It's kind of like when you look at like, the sexiest men alive, we're famous comedians on there and stuff, or, I don't know, but, obviously they've always said that, women love, men who make them laugh. So.
This reminds me of something I saw where it was like, this guy was at a party and he was getting no attention from women and he was like, screw this. So he went and got his guitar and came back. Yeah.
But I mean,
and I'm not saying it's right, but I'm like, the guys that like figure out a cheat code, I'm like, you're not going to talk them out of like 5 women. Good luck.
Yeah. But I mean, but then you talk to these guys who are like passport bros, and, they go overseas, and then what I call passport bros is almost like it's a shortcut to becoming a high value man, because, your average man is already kind of considered a high value man in the eyes of foreign women. He's already good enough.
Yeah.
And so I think that, that's why you hear these stories about guys going to Thailand, and then, they'll get all these matches on a dating app, and then women will drive, 2, 3, 4 hours to come see you and drive you around and take you around and stuff. So it's kind of like that role reversal. Going back to what I was saying about the, some of the issues I have with the manosphere, I kind of believe that a lot of the advice or the prescriptions, even though we're told that Red Pill doesn't give prescriptions, but I think it does, we're kind of just told move or improve. Be a passport bro, or, work on yourself. But work on yourself for you, but, don't do it for women, do it for you, even though we're not shaming the MGTOWs who aren't even playing the game. It's like, why aren't we shaming MGTOWs to improve for themselves? Anyway, I think a lot of it's just coping. It's not, it's basically just saying this is what we're kind of stuck dealing with. Now, you made a great point once where you said, if men had 20, 30 beautiful women in their inbox, DMing them saying, let me come over and let me cook for you and massage you and everything, don't you think it would be hard to get a man to commit?
Oh, yeah.
So
impossible. That guy is... The guy I know, he's cheating for life. He's like, it's just never going to happen.
So once again, it comes down to the fact that now that's exactly the position women are in. They have all these thirsty simps after them. So women are basically have the privilege of being more picky because they have more options. So, men would probably do a lot of the same things if they had the options as well. I think the problem is the game is so rigged to one side that we just don't have the ability to have any bargaining power. I think that our bargaining chips have been taken away from us. Our bargaining chip used to be the idea that, we were the ones who made the money. But then ever since, women got equal employment opportunities in the workforce and they're taking half the jobs now. You asked this question, if we want men to be providers, are we going to remove equal employment opportunities, which are preventing men from fulfilling the provider roles that we're advocating for? So, women want to have their cake and eat it too, while men can't have a cake or even eat one. So we have to look at what's going on culturally and within the laws. And I think, we're identifying the symptoms, but we're not looking at the root cause, what's causing these things.
Yeah, because Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of that. I've seen too much now. I feel like when I went into the space, I was so like, I did not know. And then you go into it and you're like,
Do you learn? Is there anything at this point that comes as a surprise to you, or are you're still learning new things, or?
no, nothing's a surprise anymore. I'd say the biggest surprise to me was how much women lie about abuse. I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Because that I figured out when I was doing interviews, and it was like every other show, I was abused. And then guys, like you were saying, like people put in the chat like questions to ask that I never would have thought. Because when a girl's crying or like telling a really sob story like about her abuse, your first instinct is not to say, well, did you file a police report? Did you do this? Did you do that?
Yeah.
That's not your, as like a human, you don't really want to do that.
And how dare you, because you're supposed to automatically believe all women. You can't, if you ask any questions, now all of a sudden you're victim blaming, right?
Yeah, but I would just say in general, even if it's a guy, like if he's telling me an abuse story, my just as a person, I'm not. Now I do. But back then, that was not my like initial reaction to just not believe, like, but it is kind of awkward, right?
Well, it's kind of like you got to ask women what's so attractive about a narcissist, because every woman has seemed to have dated a narcissist.
Yeah. But so I started asking them like, hey, what happened, right? And there was this turning point in one of the shows where this girl said she was abused. And I said, okay, like, did you file a police report? No. Okay. Well, tell me about like the fight that led up to the abuse. And because her story was that she was thrown down a flight of stairs. And I was like, well, that's terrible. I don't want anyone to be thrown down a flight of stairs. But she tells the story, well, I went over there and I wasn't supposed to go over there. And I was fighting with him and in front of his kid and he wanted me to leave and I wouldn't leave. And so he was pushing me out of the house. So I look at her and I said, so you were trespassing? Like it wasn't your.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I found that out, I just couldn't believe, like, I can't think of a single abuse story on the show I believed or grape.
Well, also, like, when you look at the Duluth model, what is that? That's the idea that the men are automatically perceived as the primary aggressors in domestic violence cases. But then also, isn't there statistics that women are the biggest initiators of domestic violence, especially, I guess, if you look at the domestic violence rates in lesbian relationships, much higher than domestic violence in gay homosexual relationships. And also, why would we not attribute women to being more violent when, being more emotional leads to violence?
I know. I think I have always said that women are not nurturing, because I went down this rabbit hole where I was trying to think of anything we were better at. Like anything I could back up with like a fact.
The best chefs are men, right?
No, that's what kept happening.
Right.
And then I looked up, I was like, well, we're better with infants, right? Wrong. Do you know if there's an infanticide? Do you know what that is?
Infanticide is
after the kid's born in the first year, if a kid's murdered, I think it's called an infanticide.
Okay.
That it's like 95% women are the perpetrators.
Wow.
So if a baby dies within the first year of life, it's almost like the police don't even look for male victims or male perpetrators.
Yeah. Because
it's almost always a female or the mother. And women are more likely to kill the elderly too.
What I don't understand about that, though, is like, you've heard these horror stories about women or just babies, infants being left in a dumpster.
Always women.
But the thing I don't understand is that, what about the story about women can leave their child, for adoption with the fire department or something? Why wouldn't they put up their child for adoption sooner than they would just abandon their baby?
They're mad they reproduced with a guy they didn't want to. That's what I think is behind it, is they I think that after women have kids, it's like post-nut clarity. And like guys, like they think they like a woman and then they sleep with her and they realize, oh, I just wanted the sex. I think women have that with like kids. Mm-hmm. And so, some women are just like, they go crazy. They kill their kid, Yeah. But I had a back and forth with Sneeko on a show and he just kept saying like, why do you hate women? Like women are like meant to be mothers and da-da-da-da. And I was like, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. Because if women really wanted to be mothers, we would have all, it's kind of like, I think we're like, it's like revealed preferences versus stated preferences. It's like we would have all had kids at 20, but none of us wanted to.
So do you think that women still today want to be married? Do they want families? Did they?
No. I think it's like as simple as no, they don't.
So my question also is like, when I think about, men kind of exercising their leverage and maybe going MGTOW and taking, because all men can really do at this point is maybe like take themselves off the market. But how much impact is that going to have when most of those men are already deemed invisible to women to begin with? So it's kind of like, if women only have eyes for the top men, those are the men engaging with the women and the other. So I think that but women still kind of, even though they're independent, they still rely on a lot of those 80% of men. Like they don't need those men, but they still need their money because they want to sell them OnlyFans and they want to, they still need attention from those men. So I think that if you can kind of like, create a middleman or something, something else that those men can focus on instead of chasing those women who don't want to reproduce with them or don't want to engage with them, then all of a sudden now those women have, they have to step up and, kind of conform to what those men want. Right now, they don't have to care because they already have all their needs met.
No, that's so true. But I just think it's like, it's something I even thought was true. Like we all wanted to be married and be mothers, but actually my boyfriend now said something to me once. He's like, if women wanted to be in relationships, they would be. And he's like, as a man, he's like, I cannot fathom having as much choice as you guys have and not being in a relationship. He's like, if we had 1,000 matches on a dating app, we would be on dates. He's like, if they wanted to be in relationships, you would go on a date every day of the week until you found a guy you wanted to be in a relationship with. But women aren't doing that.
Right. No, I mean, that's the thing. It's like a lot of women are hanging out with their girlfriends or they'd rather, I think I did an episode called Single by Choice. I think women are single by choice and men are single by circumstance. I think that, what needs, going back to what I was saying before, what needs are women currently deprived that they're forced to be with men? Currently, I don't think they're deprived anything. They can get all their needs met, but men are still deprived needs that they're forced to be with women, which is, companionship, intimacy, sexual access, all that other stuff.
It's also, if you look at the top like TV shows that women watch, it's all side chicks. No, like The Handmaid's Tale, Scandal. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. I think we just love being side chicks. Like, I think it's that simple. I think women, we just want to be side chicks.
Well, I mean, but don't you think that even the side chicks want to be the main chick?
Yeah, but then they become the main chick and they get bored.
Yeah.
Or it's like, they like tame the super, like, I have a friend, we're like the most unlikely of pals. He's a open relationship, super liberal. He's done like vegan protest guy. And I was like, why would you do open relationships? And he said, whenever I would go monogamous, they would start treating me bad. And he's like, I just said no. And so it was almost like pragmatic for him as he tried being like, he said, they only treat me well when they think there's other women.
Yeah.
And so even the open, like, who's more of a cuck, Crowder or Destiny? You know what I mean? Because Destiny, it's like you look at all the women he was banging. It's like Lauren Southern, like it's attractive, and you could maybe argue they're crazy, and now he paid for it later, but he ran through like all of.
Well, it's still, I mean, whether you're
he's hooking up with
whether you're conservative or whether you're liberal, it's still gynocentrism. You're still basically. You ever hear the expression, what is it, chivalry and feminism?
And by the way, I'm a fan of Crowder. I didn't mean to throw a shot.
Okay.
Sorry.
You ever hear the expression, chivalry and feminism are two sides of the same gynocentric coin?
Yeah.
It's basically both place women at a status above men, both place women on a pedestal. So we have to kind of like, realize that chivalry is the very premise that feminism is based on. Feminism would have never gained traction without the help of men. So I think that we have to look at this idea that women are prioritized. They are the prize. Whether you're a liberal like Destiny or whether you're conservative like Crowder, and it's all about keeping the happy wife, happy life, got to keep her happy and stuff, right? And when women have options and when women have power, they tend to, abuse that power and stuff. Now, maybe men would do that too, but all I'm saying is there has to be some type of, checks and balances. And there used to be checks on hypergamy. That's what Shah talks about, with the dowry. And now there aren't. And, I think there's a male version of hypergamy. I think that women wanting the bigger, better deal is the equivalent of men wanting the younger, hotter chick, or maybe even multiple women. But the family court only punishes men pursuing their hypergamy.
Right. Yeah. And I actually don't think men are as bad with leverage. I do think they would cheat, right? I do think, yeah. I had like a turning point for me where I had a guy on my show who was like a conservative, like he had a very big Christian, like conservative brand. And then he was like and he would say like cheating is bad. And then he was like dating like 4 girls from the show. And I probably wasn't like exclusive or whatever, but I don't think any of them, and different girls are telling me they're dating. Like people talk, Well, and I was like, oh shit. Most guys will cheat when they are given the option.
Well, even like when we talk about the whole body count issue and stuff, right? If we're coaching men to be the high value man that plows through women, aren't we kind of sculpting men to be the very thing that we condemn in women?
Yeah.
So is that kind of, and even when we complain about body count, does it make sense to complain about women having high body counts at the same time we're complaining about men being incels?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I just kind of see it like that's kind of how it is, unfortunately. Like I don't know if you see it changing in our lifetime. I don't, but people call me black-pilled, so.
I mean, it's almost like all roads lead to MGTOW.
Yeah.
And I think that, but at the same time, I think the people who really have it correct, the most correct, are the MGTOWs and the MRAs. Because I think that the other stuff just doesn't necessarily, most men are not going to be high-value men. And even if all men did become high-value men, high value would just become the new average.
Right.
Because like I said, average men are already high value in the eyes of foreign women. I mean, women are just going to keep raising their standards and say, oh, well, every man's a millionaire now. I want a billionaire and stuff, So I think that, this is going to take, a long, long time. But the question, must be asked, do the laws have to change first? Does the culture have to change? I think it's a combination of things because obviously, if you change laws and the culture isn't supporting it, then it sounds like a dictatorship. And if the culture changes, it's just it's just all about at least we have to have these conversations and then kind of see where it goes because it's a roulette wheel of just, voices in the space and they're all competing with each other.
And so do you think that the content's been effective? Like, do you think that more men are waking up?
To a degree. I mean, I'll ask you this because I've noticed this myself. Do you feel like, you're hearing things in your interviews now that you weren't hearing 5 years ago?
Yeah.
I've noticed that as well. I mean, there's more awareness, I think, about, the entitlement of women, things like that. But, you still have a lot of guys just kind of on this self-improvement hamster wheel. And like I said, nothing wrong with self-improvement, but I don't think self-improvement is going to fix all of men's collective issues.
Yeah, well, I don't think those guys care about men's collective issues. They're in it for themselves. I don't want to speak for all of them, right? But the guys I've known, like that came on the show and I just knew were very like successful with women. Yeah, they don't care. They don't care about men's rights. They're having a great time. They're not going to stop.
Not only that, but I mean, let's just acknowledge how many high level men have been destroyed by the legal system.
Yeah.
So it's
totally.
like, being high value isn't the end all be all. You're still subject to many laws. I mean, this is why, a lot of people, when they become a passport bro, they have to stay in that country because if you bring her back here, you're subject to the laws and you're subject to,
They just become kind of pragmatic though. So they'll get Ring cameras if we're talking like Me Too type stuff. They'll get like, I know some of them get the girls to text them the next day and say they had a good time or whatever. I'm not saying I'm not saying it can't happen to them, but the way they're going to do, I'm just telling you, that's what they do.
So basically we've gone from friends with benefits to now sleeping with the enemy. You can't even trust your partner.
Oh, they don't.
You have to maintain frame at all times. If anything happens, it's your fault because you're supposed to lead. I mean, this is, it just always will circle back to shaming men.
Yeah, well, I think the way they would kind of see it isn't really, it's not, like, they just don't care. They're trying to get sex. Like, they're not really thinking about all this stuff. They're just like, I want to bang 3 hot women a week.
Right. Now imagine.
and not care about what happens after.
Right. Now imagine if we had a safe and regulated outlet for men to fulfill that need of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Now all of a sudden they can take care of that, and now they can make smarter decisions. I mean, everyone's always telling men need to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, it's not that men need to be strong. Men need to be smart.
Yeah. Because, oh my gosh, have you ever tried to talk a guy out of like marrying someone he shouldn't marry? You can't.
No, they're going to shoot the messenger.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. No. And that's the thing. It's like, oh, another one bites the dust,
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, but you have to sit there and be congratulatory and everything. And,
Did you see the Shannon Sharp case?
I grazed yeah.
I was just curious because basically he was banging some 18 to, I think when they stopped hooking up, she was 22-year-old like OF model.
Okay.
And she was really into the BDSM stuff. And basically she set him up, and now he just got offered like a $50 million contract.
Yeah.
And I knew he was going to get a false accusation because I can just tell the difference between a guy that's really like, if he's going to be a player, like the guy I knew in London was very intelligent about it. He had systems, process, like thought, if she does this, I'll do that. And I could just tell over the years that he was like, when you could just tell a guy is just getting very cocky. He thinks it can't ever happen to them. He thinks he's like the ultimate alpha,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm like, he is going to catch a case. And he did. She said she didn't consent, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Well, it's funny because I'm actually doing an episode right now on Me Too and consent.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that it's like, I mean, are we headed towards needing consent contracts?
I knew a guy that did that.
But even then, I mean, I don't think that's going to solve anything because, it's like, okay, look at prenups. A woman can withdraw consent to a prenup. So, you know what I mean? Like, women it's a woman's prerogative to change her mind, but a man is expected to be consistent, basically,
This guy had like lines for each act that she consented to. How far can we?
Well, not only that, but also, I mean, you talk about like the whole like 50 Shades of Grey and everything. And, I mean, God, when you're dealing with women in BDSM, I mean, you're really pushing the line and stuff. I mean, one of my questions was, if consent is something that should be read through body language, why are there sexual encounters that require a safe word? Sometimes you need to have that verbal consent. But I mean, once again, there's what women say or, what we're expected to do, and then you're going to kill the attraction. So it's kind of like you're just playing with fire at that point.
Have you noticed different archetypes of people in your interviews?
Absolutely.
Like, what are some of the archetypes that you tend to see?
Well, there are the, liberal I mean, if a woman has a nose ring, she's going to be a feminist and she's going to say some liberal stuff. I mean, every once in a while there's exceptions, but if I had to generalize, obviously when I'm at the rodeo and I'm talking to people with cowboy hats on, I know I'm talking to tradcons. I think that that's a big part of it. There are, the guys who are, the alpha males, the beta males and like that. I mean, I don't really like to subscribe to that whole thing and stuff, but, it tends to be like the guys who go to the gym. They're all, about like the man is supposed to be the leader and you got to be the, and they're just big on that masculinity train or whatever. I think that a lot of people just kind of, it's almost like they're cosplaying, like they're almost wearing a costume and they don't even know necessarily, because once you start to like peel back the layers and really just ask them why they believe what they believe, like one of the funny questions I asked, like, okay, I know when I can kind of size somebody up, okay, these are the type of questions I want to ask them. Like when I knew I was interviewing tradcons, I want to throw a question at them like this. What does masculinity look like if you're not religious, traditional, or conservative? Because that's literally how they define masculinity. But does that mean you can't be like you have to be those things to be a man? You know what I mean? So according to their narrative, and so I don't know. I want to at least know kind of what I'm dealing with, so I can kind of challenge. Because if you look like this, you probably believe this. But sometimes I just run into people randomly, and I don't know what to expect. But if I go to a convention, I know, like, okay, if I go to like a comic book convention, I'm probably going to interview a bunch of nerds, and they're probably not, subscribing to all the alpha stuff. They're a little bit more like, okay, I'm just, myself, and, I embrace being, a nerd in video games and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's just, what's your experience on that?
So you have I'll tell you, but so you have like the tradcons, the feminist women, the nerds at convention. I'm just curious what else you've seen.
Well, okay. We live in Las Vegas, and I live in Las Vegas, and every culture is represented out here and stuff, right? So, there might be, bikers. There's
that's interesting.
There's bikers. There's gay
people.
Are
they conservative? The bikers?
I haven't really dived that deep into it and stuff, but I think that I would say that there's a degree of like kind of machoism or masculinity that comes with that and stuff. I mean, I think that a lot of guys who ride bikes, they get off on the the adrenaline of that and stuff, and the freedom of that. But I don't know. I mean, some people I have more experience with than others. Some guys that are kind of a little more like ghetto, a little more thug kind of, mentality and everything. And so, it's like, everything is like, constantly testing you out here. And you know what I mean? If I talk to like showgirls, the showgirls, tend to be very, boss babes and like that, they know that they can go out and, just show their stuff and get whatever they want and make money and everything. But, there's exceptions to everything. I don't know. It's just it's an interesting question.
When I interview people, I found that there's not that many exceptions. Like most people kind of believe what they look like. There's the occasional one that makes a very good interview. That'll like the conservative, like I think you had a conservative lesbian once that was like very interesting. Like I think it was one of you. Yeah.
Yeah. She was that's a perfect example because she looked like she was going to be the biggest man-hating lesbian. And she was actually like a big defender of men. And also you would expect a lesbian to be more liberal and not conservative. So
yeah, but I don't know. When I've interviewed people, I found it's like pretty easy to kind of profile people and figure out based on, there is a generational difference where, for example, one thing in dating I've noticed is men over 40-ish, depending on where the guy grew up, if it's a more liberal or conservative area, are offended by women asking to split the bill. Like they would kind of look at it as an insult over 40, where like men under 40, it may have happened to them a few times. It's not the most abnormal thing in the world. Another thing I've noticed is women, I can kind of tell their relationship problems by how they describe their ex. Okay. So like if they say, he just didn't appreciate me, I know that means that she's always going to, or like, I did so much for him equals I'm going to keep score in a relationship and count all of that. Yeah. Okay. There's little things like that where I could like translate what they're actually saying because I understand like you don't want to be in a completely one-sided relationship, but like people that like are actually doing things out of their goodwill, they're not really keeping score. And if they really feel like they're being taken advantage of, they're just going to like, they're not doing it to get something. They'll just go,
Well, yeah. If you're going tit for tat, I think that it's already the relationship is probably already
And it's usually she did like two things. I also noticed women when they give like gifts, it's always gifts that women would want and never gifts that men want. So they'll always say like, I had so many women, I asked them about gifts they gave to men. And it was like a romantic hotel room. I mean, it's stuff that's nice, but it's just not something that I think of like, a guy would really.
Well, what's the joke that women will give gifts to men? Like, okay, I'm gonna give you a toolkit so you can go fix stuff around the house. You know what I mean? So I'll just like, make you more of a utility, so you can kind of do, that kind of. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes women will, maybe buy a guy a watch or something like that, I guess. But
who are the watches for though?
I mean,
like, when do women buy a guy a video game? That's for him.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, women, I feel like men buy watches that are expensive more for women than for men.
Perhaps. Yeah.
I could be wrong. I'm not like a Rolex expert, but.
Yeah. Well, we might be just talking about the exceptions here, I guess, but.
Yeah. I was just curious if you had any like observations kind of similar in your interviews like that.
I mean, one of my like earliest interviews, I mean, obviously, when you look at the whole like romantic model and stuff, it's, flowers and candy and all that stuff. That's all for women. You know what I mean? So it's all about, just celebrating the woman and making her, feel like the rose petals. I mean, you don't see women doing all that stuff for men. You know what I mean? So. And nowadays there's this,
And if they do it, they got to put it on social media to show everyone they did it.
Well,
it doesn't count. Then.
Well, nowadays men are shamed for that because it's like, oh, he wants princess treatment and stuff, right? And the thing is that there's this like really weird black and white bubblegum dichotomy where it's like, if you're not like this super alpha macho masculine man, that means you want to put on a dress and wear makeup. You know what I mean? Or, if you don't want to, pedestalize this woman or whatever, if you want to feel, what's the expression? It says, women want love, men want respect. Mm-hmm. Well, I think they both want love and respect, but it's like, if a man wants to feel, like a woman wants to do something kind for him, it's like all of a sudden now he's going to be masculinity shamed for that, because now you want princess treatment and he'll be shamed by women or other men or whatever. And it's just like, I just get so tired of like, as a man, this is how you're supposed to sit. And this is the type of drink you can't, you can only drink these type of drinks and you can only drive this type of car. And you know what I mean?
It's just nagging.
Well, it's just everyone is trying to, define what a man is and try to, everyone's trying to like men are shamed for being toxically masculine, but then they're also shamed for not being masculine enough. So they're being shamed from both sides. So I just say to men, just stop caring what anybody thinks and just be who you want to be.
Have you done interviews in different cities or have you just stuck to Vegas?
I would like to travel more. I think that, maybe as I have the opportunity, to grow my following and, and have more revenue streams, I think that that'll, open up new opportunities for me. But, I was in Europe this summer and I went to Italy and Croatia and Greece and it's just beautiful there. But I would love to have the opportunity. Did you
do interviews or no?
I get it. I probably should have, but I'll tell you this, okay? Like certain cultures, I mean, I wonder how it was in London, but like, if in certain cultures, people are a little more timid. I don't typically get Asian people on my show.
Me either. They're the hardest to interview.
They're very shy.
The same thing in London.
Yeah. Even though there is kind of like a Chinatown area, so maybe I'll try a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. The nice thing about Vegas is that everyone comes here. So I have the opportunity to get, like if I was in, whatever, just Texas, not Texas, but if I was in just a city where everyone is basically kind of like the same, the show would kind of get stale. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about the fact that I can get just every culture represented and challenge them and see how different, but also how similar people are. Because, if you want to have this idea that, female nature and all women are the same, then wouldn't the answers all be the same?
That was what I thought about in my divorce documentary when I was working on it. Like the stories were the same. Mm-hmm. It'd be like a guy from Africa, same story. Eastern European wife, same. So I do wish the passport bros well, but some of the worst stories actually were from passport bros because there's like not extradition laws. Mm-hmm. So like if she steals your kid and brings it to her home country, like you don't have the same, a lot of them didn't have the same rights.
But then at the same time, if this is all, natural or female nature, why hasn't these things? Why hasn't the incel problem or the divorce, why hasn't that always been an issue? Why is it all of a sudden become an issue if it's nature
You know, I think
as opposed to culture?
Well, I think it's just women have the freedom to do it now.
Mhm.
Like women didn't have the freedom to like. I don't think in history women could have like taken care of herself and had society take care. You know, because women like we get all these benefits, we get free school.
Mhm.
Like life doesn't even hit us till what we're 40,
Mhm.
where like we actually have to start paying back stuff.
Yeah.
Even now, I met a bankruptcy lawyer once, and he said like you can literally like you could spend $60K, never pay it back. You get like a mark on your record, but so
Yeah.
you just got to spend $60,000, and they still get credit cards after, and he would help them rebuild their credit.
Yeah.
Like, so you know, I just think women have like the opportunity now, and we didn't before. Like we didn't have as much opportunity
this is kind of like I did an episode about this called Obsolete, but one of my line of questionings was, why are there so many women who say they don't need a man? And the women were saying things like, well, now men want to act like women, or they want to go 50-50. And if you want to go 50-50, then I just don't need you. And so I'll say, okay, well, does the fact that women no longer need men mean that the main reason women were with men was because they had to be? And if that's true, then wouldn't that prove that men were often seen as a utility to be used?
Yeah.
And wouldn't men now be better off without women if that's the main reason women would want to be with men?
Yeah, and I think that's true. I think that's what we're finding out is women don't like men as much as we previously thought.
I think men,
Yeah.
men are in love, women are in business.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So,
although a lot of times I don't think, I think men sometimes, I don't know if they know or they don't know, but I think a lot of men lie to themselves about how much they like women. Like, I don't think men really like hanging out with women
men like sex more than they like women, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. I don't really think the sexes like each other as much as we thought.
That's what I've realized as well. And that's the thing is like, when I first started doing this, there were a lot of things that I believed, and then I kind of debunked my own misconceptions. Like I thought when I first started doing this, well, men and women really want to be together and they really like each other, and women just are confused about what men actually want. And if we just kind of, get on the same page again, but I don't know. This is why I think it just comes down to, okay, I've asked women, are women today more interested in love or power?
Control.
Power.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do women get power?
Yeah. They're interested in controlling the top 10% of men. Like that's the female dream.
Yeah.
Like you watch Scandal, it's like she wants the president. She wants to use her sexual power to control the president. So that's what I would say.
But once again, it's like, by trying to, put some type of restrictions on that is misogyny. So it's kind of like, okay, well, our culture only seems to know about misogyny, but not misandry. And it's like, well, why aren't they given equal, platforms? Because at the end of the day, I mean, I think we almost really live in a culture of misandry. I mean, we've got, misandry coming from everybody. We've got it coming from the feminists. We've got it coming from the women feminists, the male feminists. We've got it coming from the tradcons. I mean, I think that gynocentrism in this romantic model, it's all about female worship. And you're, in order to be seen as a man, in order to qualify as a man, it's all about serving women. There's this thing I kind of came up with just from my own knowledge, but I call it the Holy Trinity. It's basically the idea that women have these three powers. They have sexual power, they have victimhood power, and they have chivalry power. And those three powers together.
That's great.
Yeah, those three powers together are just make them invincible.
Yeah. I was curious, have you had any groupies?
A couple, and it's actually it's funny because I mean, even though I have a pretty decent following now, whenever I'm on the street, I'll go up to just random people and I'll still say, hey, will you subscribe to my channel? Not because I necessarily need to, but I feel like Vegas is a very small town, and I want everyone here to know kind of what I'm about and who I am, and I want to just share this knowledge, this information with people. And every once in a while, like I'll meet a girl and, you know, she might be really cute and she'll be like, oh my God, I follow you. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, like that's pretty cool when I have a girl who follows me and actually appreciates what I do. Because I'll be honest with you, like one of the reasons why I was very reluctant initially to show my face was because I was afraid of the backlash. I was thinking like, oh my God, I'm going to be, you know, labeled and canceled, or, you know, I mean, I've before I kind of like tempered myself and knew how to ask questions in a way, like you said early on, like I know how to do it in a way where I'm kind of trying to not trigger people. But when I first started, I needed to kind of test the line and see how far I could push things. And I think there's like one bar that I got 86 from because I mean, God forbid, you know, some girl feels unsafe or whatever it is. She tells somebody and you're automatically out. You're guilty. And so there's been like maybe one or two instances of that. But I think since then, you know, I take it more from a much more inquisitive, like I'm just trying to understand what's going on. But I mean, God, it's just sometimes you're just going to get attacked or just, you know, criticized just for asking questions.
What did you do before this? What was your, like, do you still, I bet you live off of this, right? You don't.
Yeah, I live off this.
Like no one could have a day job and do this. Like,
yeah, no, it's,
they'll find,
yeah. I'll believe it. Like it takes me like 2 weeks to make an episode, sometimes longer depending on the weather because I'm out in the elements.
Well, your stuff is very well edited.
Thank you.
And you really like put like all the best interviews together.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, because that's the other thing too, is the fact that just to answer your first question, by the way, I used to work at a music venue out here, and I also like have done eBay and you know, buying and selling of collectibles and things like that. So my family would kind of like have that type of business. So it's always kind of been like, you know, I kind of had jobs where I just kind of work for myself. And that's kind of, but then I went to film school and I kind of learned, you know, editing and shooting and things like that. So I'm glad at least I'm using my film school education now. And so, but one other thing, people also think I have like a team of people. I pretty much do everything myself. I write, edit, you know, and it's a lot of work. And, you know, I think that, you know, if, you know, I try to put shorts out every day, if I could, you know, put out a new episode every day, I would. But like I said, just at the level that I'm at, you know, I want to put out quality, not quantity and stuff. You know what I mean? I don't want to be fast food. I want to, you know, really give people. And sometimes I interview people and they're like, wow, that's a really good question. But I don't want to put out an interview with people just going, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but that's kind of, it just kind of like if I had to give advice to anyone who was a creator, I would say just start doing it and tweak as you go because it's an evolving thing. I mean, you're not making the same content you were when you started. So if you just, you know, find something you're passionate about and keep doing it, then, you know, eventually you'll find yourself along the way.
So, how do you, like, would you get married in this climate?
Well, I mean, not on paper. I think that I don't think you need to be married. I think that you know, you could just have a relationship with somebody. This is not a common law state, I believe. But I don't know. For some reason, I think that in my weird mind, I think that relationships might actually work out better if assuming you don't have children. I'm assuming that if either one of you could leave at any time and you stay together, that means more because, you know, love is a choice. And, you know, if you know what I mean? There's nothing keeping you there, but you choose to stay there. That means more. You know, just like it's funny because I post shorts every day, and I mentioned to you that today's short was about talking to you about love languages from our interview, you know, years ago. And I think that quality time is probably your most important choice because time is your most precious resource, and you make time for what's important.
And you know what's interesting? I had the same, I wrote like when I took a break after I left London and I wrote down my conclusions, and that was my conclusion, was that the form of marriage we have today is the most superior. Not the loveless, sexless man, but the people that like in a way, the women, I don't want to say the men that stay because men will stay, like the few people that make it actually do love each other because they choose to be together, where before it might have been religion, it might have been culture, it might have been they had no other choice.
Yeah.
Where now they both want to.
So this is one of my questions I asked at the end of my dowry episode. At what point in history do you think that marriage worked the best?
At what point in history do I think marriage works the best? I don't know. Because I can't say today with the laws.
Well, I think you've said that marriage today isn't even marriage.
Yeah. I don't know, 1700s maybe.
Okay.
I don't know when gynocentrism. I was trying to remember. I can't off the top of my head remember when gynocentrism.
Well, it's interesting
because it was medieval times, wasn't it? The last time, like before.
When did gynocentrism? When did the romantic model take over?
Yeah, wasn't it after medieval times? Am I wrong? I could be wrong.
I mean, chivalry, and medieval knights kind of, I think that kind of goes hand in hand. So.
No, but wasn't that where it started? They wanted to like bow to the women instead of the knights.
Yeah. I believe that would probably be, but I mean, maybe if we,
I don't know.
Get some of our friends on the phone and we can.
I wasn't alive at any of those time periods.
Well, that's the thing also. And we have to question history and look at, multiple sources because obviously things, might have been rewritten or whatever it is. But I don't know. I mean, I was talking to a woman the other day about the dowry and she was saying, well, the whole concept of a dowry, was, that was a rule invented by a man. Feminists always want to try to dismiss everything as, well, a man came up with that. Who came up with that system? Have you heard that argument all the time? And I'm saying, well, men can be victims of other men. So just because, men came up with a system that might, punish other men, does that mean that we don't care about men? You know what I mean? Like if women are victims of what's the question? Because I don't want to screw this up. It's like, do women oppress other women or do only men oppress women according to feminists? Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, if men oppress other men because men sent other men to war or enslaved other men, do we not care about that? So how are we living in a patriarchy if men have oppressed men more than they've ever oppressed women?
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. I've had a point where I decided I need to stop romanticizing the past because we really don't know. Because I think at one point I would really romanticize marriage in the past. And then I started reading some accounts. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know if it was what we thought it was.
Would you get married?
I really don't think if I loved the guy, I'd want to put him in that position, to be honest. If he wanted to, I would. Mm-hmm. Like if he wanted to.
Would you sign a prenup?
Yes. I want to sign a prenup for me.
Well, that's the thing is it really like whenever, whoever's money is on the line, I guess you would say.
Yeah. But yeah, I would. You would? Would you?
I mean, at the very least, but I mean, prenups don't even hold up apparently. So, I guess, what do they say? The best prenup is no marriage?
Yeah.
Do you believe that prenups invalidate the sacrament?
No, I don't. Because it's just smart. I don't. You know what? I'm too black-pilled. I barely, it just doesn't mean anything anymore. So.
When did you officially become black-pilled? Because I'm assuming when you first started doing this, you weren't.
No, I wasn't. I was not.
And do you think that
the divorce documentary black-pilled me? Because I saw women that I would deem as better than me do worse things than I thought I would ever do. So I would interview these women and by every account, I'm like, they're better. I'm like, they're softer than me. They're like, they got married younger than I did. They were more traditional. They were by every account, on paper, I'm like, but you did this awful thing, god awful. And I'm like, holy shit. That's when it kind of clicked for me. I'm like, I'm not seeing a difference between the behavior of conservative women and porn stars. Mm-hmm. I'm not seeing any difference.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my, yeah.
Well, that's the other thing too. Even when I did this episode, when I was interviewing some of the country girls, the traditional women, this viral clip about I said, is a man less of a man if he can't change a flat tire? Is a woman less of a woman if she can't cook a meal from scratch? And you're seeing the double standards right there, and it's like these, can literally be undercover feminists. They're just wearing a costume,
Can we talk about how?
And they love simps.
Yeah.
They all love simps.
And they just want to do this new trad wife content. I'm like, ladies, can we just talk about how it's kind of a waste of time to make bread? You can go buy it for like $5.
Sourdough, yeah, of course.
And you know what? I made bread once, right? Because I wanted to see.
Yeah.
And I was like, this isn't as good as the stuff I buy in the store. Maybe I'm just not that good at making it, right?
Well, what's happening with the wife school and stuff? Is that part of it?
I went through, I did like the wife school. That was fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked it. It was a fun thing, but I just didn't have time to do it, to be honest.
Okay.
And everyone was just roasting me for doing it. So
you're working on the divorce documentary and the wife school. You got a lot of stuff going on.
I took on way too many projects. That was like, and then I got demonetized. It was like, after I got demonetized, I had to like cut it. But it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I really like cooking. So I wouldn't even... Like, I just like doing it.
I remember asking you this. You're like, you make really mean chicken, right?
I do. I like cooking. Like, I'm not the best, but I do like doing it. But I do think making bread is a waste of time. I do like... And I tried to make a pizza from scratch once, and I was like, why didn't I just buy it? So some of the trad wives, they'll like talk, and I'm like... Just like go to Chipotle.
Well, no, not only that, but it's like, with women, yes, it's like, they can go to Chipotle or whatever it is. And for the men, oh, you're not a man if you can't change a flat tire. Well, why not just call AAA? We have modern conveniences now. We can, even when we talk about women being, trad wives, men have invented appliances to make women's lives so much easier.
I know. And we don't have as many kids.
Yeah, but what have women invented to make men's lives easier?
Oh, nothing.
Nothing, of course not.
But my point is like the trad wives, there's no really need for trad wives because women have two. Like I come from 10 kids.
Okay.
Not 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the different, like when there's 10, you're going to have the hard part growing up that I would say was the most time consuming was when the kids were, and I'm not a mother, so this is just what I remember, but when the kids were under 3. Right. So it was like, it's like for 10 years, you always have a kid that's under 3, but like you're done in 5. Yeah. So I'm like, we need to make bread.
Well, one thing I heard the other day, it's like if childbirth is the worst pain in the world, why do women continue having babies?
They stopped.
And also, if divorce is such a horrible thing, why would a man ever get remarried?
I think it's, the most, I'm taken now, but when I was dating, I found the most desperate guys were once divorced. Where like, they were just like, I need a new wife right now. Like it would be like, and I was like, whoa, let me get to know you for, And those would be the guys that would just put me on this like crazy pedestal where they're, and it would just be like, how do I put this? They didn't want the dream to die. And so that's what I find why men got married again is they're still in the tradcon like mindset, right? Mm-hmm. And they like that ego belief, like they cannot, they're like, no, I just picked one wrong girl. This is not the nature of women. Right. This is not my Christian beliefs. I picked wrong. Yeah. And like you even heard Crowder say that when he like got one through, I just picked wrong. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't anything about.
So I haven't really followed much up on Crowder, but what's his current state or what's his current views on the state of marriage?
I think he's kind of avoided the topic after, to be honest. Yeah. I haven't like, I really would love to do an in-depth interview with him. I've been working on it the last couple months, so it could happen.
Because you wonder, like, what would happen if, God forbid, any of the other guys at the Daily Wire, got hit with a divorce.
Oh, one of them will. It's just like a numbers game.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. And just, and it's weird because it's like, I really enjoy a lot of their content when it comes to certain topics. It makes a lot of sense. But then as soon as I start talking about men's issues, they just lose me because they're just stuck in this 1950s model that just isn't even practical in today's world.
Well, and it's playing pretend because I was doing this with the Christian guys because they all want to sell me that their like girl is different, right? And I'm like, okay, what age did you meet her? What was she doing here? Did she go to and if you look at like, because I've done spreadsheets, I'm like autistic like this. I've done like a literal spreadsheet of all the tradcon women and the age they got married, how many children they had, what age, because there's like 2 types of marriages I found with tradcon women. They either wait and push it off or and then still claim traditional, but like they get like Charlie Kirk is always saying that he was a virgin on his wedding day. I don't hear that from his wife. I don't know. Like I don't know if she was or she wasn't. I just don't hear that. But or if they do get married young, it's like a Lauren Chen type marriage where they still wait. And it's like nobody wants to spend youth on their husbands. Like that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
So basically though, it's like cosplay. Like it's not, it's like everyone's modern, but no one wants to admit it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And even I'm trying to think, there was even like they all went to college. There's no difference.
The state of marriage right now is, like I said, it's on life support. I don't know if there's going to be any changes. If is it going to take men to really just boycott marriage and say we're not going to do it under these conditions? That's really going to make any difference. But I mean, the tradcons will admit that the divorce.
They just say just do it anyway.
They'll say that's where I'm getting at. They'll say just do it anyway and stuff. And I'm like,
I was just on this show, and he asked me like, how do men fall for this? And I said, well, earlier in the show you told me that you were not you don't believe in prenups, but you've seen the nature of women. Like you've seen the market, right? So why?
Yeah, but I mean, why are they not the ones fighting the hardest to get these laws changed? Why is it
they're getting paid? Like it's because they have more, like, I don't know if you agree with this, but it's like they have more control over like their money and everything if women are making their own. So that if you get like, cause I always divide everything $8, $2. So if I can make $8 off of one market and $2 off of another, why wouldn't I want the women single? Why wouldn't I want they need them in their church. They need them. Like, I bet you the biggest donors to them are either women or men trying to sell to women.
So once again, follow the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, same old story. But no, I think that, you see a lot of people just kind of like speaking out of both sides of their mouth, or like I said, they'll just say, oh, well, feminism's the only problem. And it's like, no, we have to look at the whole picture here, because this is not, people say it took us 100 years to get here, and it's going to take us 100 years to get out of this. And it's like, well, what is the goal here? Is the goal to go back to the 1950s? I mean, then, okay, let's take away, 70 years worth of laws. And you know what I mean? Like, we can't, we're not going back to traditionalism. I think you said that and stuff. So it's like, okay, well, then does it really make sense to keep men in a traditional role when women have been liberated?
Correct. Yeah. I don't think it does. So,
but I think that's kind of like what everyone's pushing for. And I think that,
good luck.
it's like, well, then we complain that, men are simping, and it's like, well, aren't kind of men kind of pushed into a simp dynamic where it's happy wife, happy wife, happy life is the only thing that's going to keep them, in that, like I said, they're held hostage and stuff. So,
yeah. Yeah. Legalize prostitution. I'm with you.
I think that's part of it. I think it's a solution. I don't think it's the solution, but I think it probably would at least, maybe, create some balance in the leverage.
So what would 3 solutions, what would they be? So legalize prostitution.
Legalize prostitution. I would say definitely there's got to be caps on spousal and child support. We have to look at the sex laws, the consent laws, because obviously that has nothing to do with masculinity. That has everything to do with just bias in the system. What else? I think we need some real serious discussions about, the episode I'm doing on consent, we need to have some serious conversations about what consent actually looks like, what kind of, masculinity means, maybe redefine masculinity. And that doesn't necessarily mean that men want to become women. It just means that men want to be liberated from, all these sexist expectations and burdens placed on them that don't really yield them any results that they want anyway. And I think that, maybe just understanding that men are human beings with feelings and we're not just a utility. So,
do you think AI sex bots are going to change anything?
I've asked about that, and I think it's interesting. Isn't that an advanced form of corn?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, obviously there was a movie with Joaquin Phoenix called Her, and it's like, okay, I've seen all these people say, wait until the AI girlfriends come out. We'll just, it's like men and women are trying to engineer each other out of the equation. We don't need women anymore because we can basically get an artificial womb, which is just an advanced form of a surrogate. I've read articles that maybe they're trying to develop artificial wombs to grow babies. Do I think that'll happen? We've already seen things that I never thought were possible, so who knows at this point?
IVF kind of solved fertility. You know what's crazy? So if you hook up with a 20-year-old that's ovulating, what do you think your chance of getting her pregnant is?
50%?
25.
Okay.
So if you do a round of IVF treatments, what is her chance of getting pregnant from it?
Well, I know you have to have several, multiple procedures, and each procedure could be up to like $30,000, I think, or something, right?
Correct. But remember, they're trying to make it free. Right?
Okay.
That's or more affordable. They're trying to subsidize IVF.
Okay.
I'm not saying there are not complications with it. I'm not saying it's good or bad.
Right.
But what do you think the % chance of getting pregnant off of IVF is? Off of one round?
Oh my God, that's got to be like 5%.
50.
What?
50%. And I had people call into my show talking about their experience, and they did, like, on average 2 rounds.
Okay.
So I think that the number of births from IVF is way higher than we think, because they've essentially, if you have the money for it, re-engineered fertility. Where now, to be fair, right, it's a lot easier to just have sex when she's ovulating for a year at 20.
Yeah.
But I still could not believe that it was that high. Like, to me, it's insane that essentially if you have money, you've re-engineered fertility.
Wow, that is crazy.
And I know there's issues. I know everyone in the chat will say like, oh, well, the babies are autistic. Yeah, I'm not saying it's a perfect system.
Well, I'm saying like, obviously.
But they get a kid. Like, I'm like, that's insane. And even at like 40, it's like way higher than I thought. I think it's like 10% or 5%, which I think is insane.
Well, yeah, but at that age, the risk of geriatric pregnancies. So, I mean.
Oh, I'm not saying it's like, but I even thought like out of 100 that 10 will get a kid at 40. That's crazy.
Well,
like that's crazy. And they're going to keep selling it to us that it's going to be attainable. So I think there's going to be like more moms over 40 than ever in history.
Yeah.
But obviously for every winner, there's like 10 losers.
Well, what about that statistic where they say, by 2040, 45% of women are going to be single and childless? So does it account for that?
Well, I think they're just pushing it off. Like, women will keep having kids, but we're just going to push it older and older. So like like Giselle Bundchen has convinced all these women that they're going to get pregnant at 42. By a jujitsu instructor.
It's kind of crazy though, because it's like when women are young and fertile, they want to have abortions, and then when they start, aging out, then they want to have IVFs.
We don't want to spend our youth, because it's like, okay, it's like women. Like, they're not going to get to go on a yacht in Miami pregnant. They'll never get the chance. Right. They'll never get the chance to be on that yacht again.
Right. So they're trying to maximize, take advantage of all their,
the beauty opportunities.
Right.
And then get a kid at 42.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but that's the thing, is that's what technology is all about, giving people options.
Correct.
And that's why I'm saying, okay, so if we're going to subsidize IVF for women, why don't we have the government subsidize prostitution for men?
I'm with you. I think they should, but
Yeah. Why do you think it's not talked about in the manosphere? I mean, I've asked certain people if that would be a game changer, and they've said yes, I think it would. So why is that never looked at as a option? Is it just because it's immoral, it's degenerate, or it's perceived that way, even though it was legal in the past?
I wonder if it's maybe seen as a shortcut, and they think like you should do the work of like approaching 10,000 women, or
why are we more focused on
because
trying to sell men a dream that most will never achieve instead of actually let's come up with a practical solution that actually makes sense and is something like, does anybody want to make things easier for men, or do we, you know what I mean? Like who is actually an ally? Who's actually trying to help men versus just blame men and say, you don't want to do the work and, you know, men need to step up. I mean, it just seems like, you know, if it's feminists or it's tradcons or some red pillars are all saying the same thing, what's the difference? It all sounds like feminism to me.
Yeah. You need to go on Fresh and Fit. I would love to hear this conversation between you two. I think it'd be really interesting.
Well, like I said, I mean, you know, there's a lot of things that we can agree on, but there's some things we don't agree on, and I can respectfully, you know, challenge people if they're open to it, you know.
Well, thanks so much we're coming on time, so thanks so much for coming on today.
This was great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I really enjoyed having you on. You're like one of the few content creators that really can make me think and like almost stop me in my tracks. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for that. No, seriously.
Do you want to tell the people where they can find you?
Yes. So I can be found on YouTube. It's Complicated Channel is the name. And basically, I'm also on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. And yeah, just subscribe to the channel, leave comments, like, share. A lot of people use my clips and they don't really know who I am. So that's why I appreciate this opportunity to kind of show my face and at least get my face and my brand kind of linked up a little bit, because people don't really know who I am, but they know my work and they know my voice. So appreciate that.
Would you ever do street interviews like sitting down?
I'm open to trying all different things now, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that maybe my format, you know, is you know, fine, you know, in different scenarios.
Oh, you did whatever, right?
Yeah, I did that. But you know, I mean, I could go on podcasts. I think that for me, being on the street, there's certain limitations, and I have more opportunities to maybe like dive a little bit deeper into deeper conversations and follow up questions when I'm on a podcast or in a controlled setting. So I'm open to it, you know.
Cool. Well, guys, make sure you go subscribe. He has the best questions on YouTube. Really, no one does it better. So like the video on your way out. Please subscribe to the channel. Ring that notification bell, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.